Hi, I'm Matt with State of Flex here to talk about the 10th film of Kevin Smith. This one was kind of interesting because this one he had announced before Zack and Miri Make a Porno. He announced it on the same day he announced Zack and Miri Make a Porno that he was going to do that feature, followed by a horror film that was going to be akin to a movie called Race with the Devil. Which was a 70s made-for-TV movie that doesn't really have much to do with this movie at all, outside of like Satanic Panic a little bit, but this doesn't even really delve much into that. Anyway, then Zack and Miri kind of flopped a little bit. He ping-ponged with his career and decided to be a director for hire. Ended up making Cop Out, which got lambasted by critics, and he had the worst filmic experience of his life making that movie in working with Bruce Willis, and the two of them butted heads considerably throughout the entirety of that production. So he announced that he was indeed going to follow through with making Red State. And Red State was going to be his last feature film. This was going to be his farewell to the world of filmmaking, and he was just going to become like a podcaster or a TV, like radio personality kind of thing, and ride out his career that way. And if he had gone that route, this is a really strong, if a bit perplexing, final film to go out on. It's much more of a Kevin Smith film than his previous venture with Cop Out. But it's weird in that it is a sort of a genreless movie. The first 10 minutes or so start off very Kevin Smithy with a lot of like snappy banter and some funny lines here and there from three teens who decide that they're going to go on a road trip to hook up with a woman. Then the movie shifts gears and becomes sort of a horror film. If not horror, it's certainly like a thriller for a good chunk of its second act, where these kids are lured to this place by a woman whose sole intent is to capture sinners. The three boys are incapacitated and brought to a church. The 5 Point Baptist Church, which decides that they're going to rid the world of sinners and do Jesus' true holy work. And they've already captured a gay man who they brutally kill, and everything is shot incredibly horrifically, and the camera puts you right up in the action of what's happening, and it is genuinely horrifying. And then the film switches gears yet again, and it becomes kind of like this action thriller where the FBI have a standoff with the 5 Pointers in their church. And I really like that this movie just keeps shifting from what a traditional narrative would have you go. That's kind of one of the real strengths of the movie, is you really have no idea what's going to happen at any given point, in kind of a good way. It keeps you hooked in, and it's also edited very, very finely. Smith did the editing himself, as he did with all his previous movies, sans Mallrats. And where, like, I had a criticism for both Zack and Miri Make a Porno, Clerks 2, Cop Out, that none of those movies have energy. This movie is, like, brimming with energy. The creative flow is there. And I said back in my Chasing Amy review that Kevin Smith works best when he has something to prove. And this time, I think he truly felt that this was going to be his final movie, so he was going to make his final stamp be like a hit back at the biggest criticism his career has ever had, which is he doesn't know how to make a movie. All of his movies are camera placed in front of person talks towards general direction of camera, characters talk, that's kind of his thing. This film is incredibly visually stimulating. The camera work by director of photography Dave Klein, who shot Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, took that long extended break, really learned his craft, and then came back on board with Clerks 2 and delivered a really strong work with Zack and Miri Make a Porno, hits a home run here. And I think this film that got him his job on later TV shows, such as oh, I can't remember the name of it. It starts with Home. I can't remember. God, I suck. But then he's currently working on The Mandalorian right now. Like this sort of proves how well he knows how to shoot action. The action in this film is very visceral, and I think that also has to do with some of the editing work. The camera is, they kind of go the shaky camera out, where the camera's following the subject at any given time. But it's not necessarily shaky. The camera seems stable. I think what Smith did as an editor is trim frames to give it like a frenetic quality of like you can't really tell what's happening, to give you the experience of the person who's being photographed within that frame. Because when you have like the pursuers running, like there's a shot of Ralph Garman who's chasing after one of the kids, when it's on him, the camera's tight and it's not like, nothing loses its focus. But the moment it transitions to the kid who's running away, who's being pursued, that's where it feels like it's shaky and you can't really tell what's quite happening. I feel like he's trimming frames, and it's put to excellent use. The cast of this movie is really its shining point. Everybody is spectacular. In fact, when Ben Affleck first saw this movie, Smith asked him if he wanted to throw like a quote to go out there into the public so that they could put it on the poster. And his famous quote was, "This movie has a great cast." And Smith was like, "Dude, you won an Oscar for writing. That's the quote you're going to give me?" He then revamped it. But it's not lost on me that 3 of the actors from this movie went on to be stars of Affleck's next film, which was Argo, Best Picture winner. And he took, I think, the 3 strongest elements of this film and put them in that movie in relatively prominent roles. Michael Parks owns this film. He is the crazy Baptist preacher, and you feel like he believes everything he is saying, which makes everything he says so palpably disturbing. And like he also has this quality of being kind of a likable, nice guy. So when he's saying all these horrific things, it becomes more threatening. And he just gives a great performance. His sermon, which heads the second act, it starts the second act. His sermon, which is basically a 5 to 11 minute like uninterrupted speech, is some of the strongest writing Smith has done since Chasing Amy, and because Dogma was written before Chasing Amy. Some of the strongest writing he's done since Chasing Amy, but the best performance work from any actor in a Smith movie. Like that performance there is just so you can't take your eyes off of it. It's more engaging than any moment of action in the entire film, and it's just a guy walking back and forth, kind of like a lion, talking to the parishioners, and it is such strong performance. You have really good everybody else who's sort of like along the side. The 3 main kids are spectacular. Kyle Gallner really stands out in his performance. And then you have John Goodman, who really takes command of the second half of this movie. He is the head FBI agent tasked with taking down Michael Parks' character. And he's just like a beast of a dude. But he also has a weight of conscience and is not a fan of the directive he's been given. And so he has to weigh his options as to whether to follow orders or essentially lose his job. And that is kind of an interesting dramatic element put into play. There's also lots of other strong performances, even in very small like character beats. Stephen Root is really, really good. He had worked with Smith previously in Jersey Girl. He commits to every single role he's given, and he is so good in this movie as the sheriff who initially calls in, sorry, cat being weird again, the sheriff who calls in the 5 pointers, shots fired call. So my Stephen Root's fantastic. Kevin Pollak is great. Yeah, there's not really much to say beyond that. The elements of surprise, the exceptional performances, the visual style, the excellent screenplay, um, all demonstrated to sort of prove to the critical audience that, like, hey, you say I can't make a movie, this is me attempting it, it's my last one, mother effers, drop the mic. That was kind of his play. Um, and all of that stuff worked for me. There are a couple elements that I think I did have a little bit of criticism of. Namely, the ending seems like a bit of a cop-out. The final 5 minutes or so are really good. They're well written, well acted, especially by John Goodman. But you have like this build up and build up and build up of everything. You have no idea where everything is going, and then all of a sudden horns start blaring, and then the five pointers rise to the surface, and they confront John Goodman and his team, and you're like, what's going to happen? And camera cuts to two people talking, Kevin Smith style, in a room, and a fixed camera and nothing much visually interesting happening any longer. And like the dialogue is good. I like John Goodman in the scene, and I like his sentiment of he has like this long speech, and then he ends the speech by saying, people will do the craziest things if they believe they're entitled, but they do even crazier if they just simply believe. I like that line. That line is a very strong line, and it kind of gets to the core of this film, and also harkens back to the core message of Dogma, right? Dogma's whole purpose was that having a belief in any given structure is problematic because beliefs can't be changed. People die for it. People kill for it. This movie is like emblematic of that. It's much better to have an idea because you can change an idea. Ideas are meant to be changed and to alter and to grow. And that is what, like, Jesus' message was, right? That was what Dogma had to say. This movie shows you the dark half of what Chris Rock's character was saying in that scene. So I do think this makes for an excellent coupling with Dogma. You're in for a weird day when you watch those two movies, but I also think this movie partners well with Clerks. Clerks has an edgy, gritty quality that is not reflected in any of the movies that he made afterwards. Clerks is very much its own thing, and the only one that comes close to having the same gritty edge to it, and also vibrancy of proving oneself, is this film. Chasing Amy has like a frank earnestness that I really like, and I think that's his best film, but it doesn't have quite the edge that Clerks has or this has. So yeah. So my problem is the ending kind of falls a little short. It's not lost on me that Smith has gone on record saying that that is not the original scripted ending. The original scripted ending had the horns blaring, the five pointers rise, they confront the SWAT teams and the FBI, the horns continue to blare, and then angels descend from the heavens with flaming swords and start destroying and slaughtering all of the 5-point Baptist church parishioners, saving Aben Cooper, the Michael Parks character, for last. And it was supposed to be Ben Affleck reprising his role from Dogma, and he turns to John Goodman with his like little shh, and then ascends back up, and that was the original ending. And I think that ending, well, it would have been like a what the fuck, would have been kind of the stronger ending and more in tone with what you're seeing through most of the movie, especially when a movie's keep constantly switching lanes, essentially, zigging when it ought to be zagging. So yeah, that's my one problem. And then there's another problem that doesn't age well, and this has nothing really reflective in the movie. This more actually harkens back to that whole edgy quality that I was talking about, which is that when Smith was first announcing this movie, he was making a horror movie. I think he made the announcement that he was going to make a horror movie next when he made Zack and Miri, because he couldn't convince Harvey Weinstein to greenlight this picture. So putting it out there that he was going to make a horror movie and see what public response was kind of his play. And it didn't necessarily pan out. I think had Zack and Miri taken the world by storm, he might have had that chance under the Weinstein Company. But having his huge fallout with Harvey Weinstein, apparently they had a big blowout, and he refused to work with Harvey again. He moved on to Warner Brothers and made his movie with Warner Brothers, because that's apparently what filmmakers do when they break up with their favorite company. Then he decided he was going to retire. He ended up financing this movie himself. And he came up with the money to make it, and he came up with a new company. No longer was it going to be View Askew. He was going to release his movie under the Harvey Boys, which really hasn't aged well. The idea was that back in the day, Harvey Weinstein and the Weinstein Company, then at Miramax, catered to really true independent voices and filmmakers, and that's how Smith was found, and that was the creative environment that he wanted to be a part of and to really pay respect to. And so, since Harvey had long since not gone that route, he wanted to really pay respects to somebody he had quite a bit of reverence for. And he did. So this movie is a Harvey Boys movie from @that Kevin Smith, Red State. That's what the opening title cards read. And I think that hasn't aged terribly well. Harvey Weinstein had all of his hoopla happen, and Smith's response to all of the accusations against Harvey was that he had made several movies with Harvey that he's still making money off of and residuals for. And so everything that he gets paid from those from here on out, all the residual checks that come in, he was going to put towards a company that helped to cater and finance women who've been hurt by this industry. And I think that's a really kind of powerful statement. So I guess there's one good thing that came out of that. But anyway, Red State, where do you land on this? Critically, it was mostly positive. It had a slightly mixed nature, but I think that comes from two avenues. One is it's really attacking a very bigoted part of our populace that we have trouble acknowledging. This movie is a direct reflection of Fred Phelps and what was going on with the West Point Baptist Church, and this was his kind of dismantling of that group of people. But for some people, simply acknowledging even their existence is too much, and they like to pretend as if it never was there. So a lot of critics, I think, harkened on the fact that, like, why pay even a remote acknowledgement to something that shouldn't be? And I think the answer that you find and that the film sort of lands on is, like, you need to expose these people for what they are, because if you don't, you're going to get a big explosive response that is going to be cataclysmic at some point. The critics, mostly favorable, but some attacked that avenue. The fact that this is sort of an unmovie, a movie that doesn't go any traditional route that a movie should or ought to take, is another big sticking point. You either go with that conceit or you don't. And if you don't go with that, this is kind of a hard movie to sit through, because it is ugly. This is an ugly movie, and it's a hard movie to endure at times, unless you're looking at the artistry of the filmmaking behind it. And then, lastly, when you go to see a Kevin Smith film, you kind of go to sort of turn your brain off and have a good time. And this movie asks a lot of you, and it asks pointedly not to laugh at what's happening on screen. And so, when you've been conditioned for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies to expect one thing out of a filmmaker, and he gives you something different, it's kind of hard to switch gears that way. I sort of liken it to John Krasinski is an excellent filmmaker of horror films and stuff like that, but he had done mostly dramatic directorial work before that, and I think if he had had more success with those films and then made A Quiet Place, you would have had a similar response. The only antithesis to that would be like a Jordan Peele, who's exclusively known as comedic, who then did Get Out, and now is exclusively known as horror, because that's the only avenue he's been taking of late. But even with that comparison, none of those works were as huge, as successful as the reputation that Smith had gained for such a long period of time. Also, the content of the Jordan Peele comic sketches from Key and Peele and like his movie Keanu and stuff like that are all based around social issues anyway, so it's not that unheard of to go from social comedy to social horror, whereas Smith isn't necessarily a message filmmaker, and then switches gears to sort of like a message horror movie, or thriller, or whatever you want to call this movie. But yeah, anyway, thanks for listening. I love this movie. I give it 3.5 out of 4 stars. I think this is his most creatively intriguing film of the 2000s. And let me know what you think of this film in the comments below. Ding the bell, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And next week, we will be talking about Kevin Smith's horror masterpiece and or horror repulsive film, Tusk. See where I land on Tusk next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.